There's a hidden framework that separated legendary commanders from forgotten ones. It wasn't about armies or weapons. It was a cognitive operating system that transformed chaos into clarity and pressure into precision. The same mental architecture works today in boardrooms, startups, and your daily grind. Let's decode it. What if the real battlefield was always in your mind, not on the ground? Picture this. Before Alexander the Great faced the Persian Empire, he spent months studying not just military formations, but human psychology. He understood that battles were won in the mind before swords were drawn. While his enemies prepared logistics, he prepared mental frameworks. That's the difference between tactical execution and strategic domination. Ancient strategists knew something we've forgotten. Decision fatigue is more dangerous than physical exhaustion. Hannibal didn't just cross the Alps with elephants because he was bold. He calculated every variable: morale, surprise, enemy expectations, terrain psychology. He engineered a mental shock that paralyzed Roman decision-making before the first spear was thrown. That's cognitive warfare at its finest. Sun Tzu wrote that knowing yourself and your enemy guarantees victory. But here's what most people miss. This isn't about gathering information. It's about building mental models. Ancient generals created internal simulations of battles before they happened. They rehearsed scenarios, anticipated reactions, pre-decided responses. When chaos erupted, they didn't think, they executed preloaded decisions. Modern neuroscience confirms what they knew instinctively. The brain has limited processing capacity. Every decision drains cognitive resources. Roman generals understood this. That's why they developed doctrine, standard operating procedures, automatic responses. They automated the trivial to preserve mental energy for critical moments. The legion conquered because soldiers didn't waste brainpower deciding how to fight. They just fought. But here's where it gets interesting. The greatest military minds didn't just conserve mental energy, they weaponized focus. Spartan warriors trained in conditions designed to eliminate distraction, not as punishment, but as performance enhancement. They knew that divided attention creates vulnerability. Total focus creates dominance. Your modern life is the opposite. Constant notifications, infinite choices, perpetual distraction. You're fighting with the compromised operating system. And here's the twist. Ancient commanders faced uncertainty far greater than yours. No satellite imagery, no instant communication, no weather forecasts. Just fog of war and complete information, and irreversible decisions. Yet they thrived. How? They trained their minds to function without perfect information. While others froze waiting for clarity, they moved with conviction based on principles, not data. That skill matters more now than ever. Why? Military precision isn't about perfection, it's about elimination. Here's what changes everything. When you study how generals like Julius Caesar operated, you discover something counterintuitive. They weren't maximizing performance, they were minimizing friction. The Roman war machine dominated, not because soldiers were superhuman, but because friction was systematically eliminated from every process. Think about it. Caesar didn't win Gaul by making more decisions than his enemies. He won by making fewer, better decisions. He built systems that handled 90% of warfare automatically. Soldiers knew their roles. Officers knew their objectives. Communication followed protocols. This freed Caesar's mental bandwidth for the 10% that actually mattered, strategic inflection points where genius could create disproportionate advantage. The Spartans took this even further. Their entire society was designed around one principle: remove everything that doesn't contribute to excellence. Not as asceticism, but as optimization. Every distraction eliminated, every unnecessary choice removed. What looks like rigidity was actually radical simplicity. In pursuit of peak performance, they asked, what can we subtract to get stronger? Only that's not the strangest part. What really differentiated elite commanders was recognizing when not to act. Fabius Maximus defeated Hannibal by refusing to fight. While Rome demanded action, he understood that patience was a weapon. He let time, terrain, and logistics do the work. That's strategic discipline. Resisting pressure to do something when doing nothing is optimal. How often do you fall into that trap? The samurai codified this with the concept called mushin, mind like water. Not meditation or mysticism. It's the trained absence of mental interference. When action is required, there's no hesitation, no second guessing, no internal debate. Just immediate, precise execution. Western psychology now calls this flow state, but they understood it centuries ago. The path to it is through ruthless elimination of mental clutter. Here's the critical insight. You're not underperforming because you lack talent or motivation. You're hemorrhaging cognitive resources on micro-decisions that drain the exact mental energy you need for breakthrough performance. Ancient strategists automated everything automated able. You're doing the opposite. Every morning, you decide what to wear, what to eat, when to check messages, whether to respond now or later. Death by 1,000 decisions. The military framework isn't about adding structure for structure's sake. It's about creating freedom through strategic constraints. When the trivial becomes automatic, the exceptional becomes possible. And there's something even more powerful hidden in this principle. How do you map your mental terrain the way commanders mapped battlefields? Before you comment, drop one word: focus. Now tell me, do you architect your day like a general planned a campaign? Because that's what separates systematic achievement from random productivity. Ancient commanders never entered unknown territory. They mapped every hill, river, choke point, escape route. Not paranoia control. Terrain dictated strategy. Strategy dictated victory. Translation for your world. Do you know the terrain of your energy? When you're sharpest. When distractions hit hardest. When focus comes naturally. Most people treat their day like guerrilla warfare: react and survive. Strategists plan conquests. Alexander had a ritual that modern executives would call strategic preparation. Before major decisions, he'd visualize multiple scenarios. If this happens, I do that. If they respond this way, I counter this way. Pre-decision making. When the moment arrived, he didn't deliberate, he activated preloaded responses. That's how he conquered the known world by 32. Not genius. System design. And this is where everything shifts. Prussian military theorist Karl von Clausewitz wrote that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. But here's the insight most people miss. That's not about plans being useless. It's about building adaptable frameworks, not rigid scripts. Ancient generals expected chaos. They didn't panic when it arrived. They had principles strong enough to guide improvisation. Without principles, adaptation becomes panic. You see this in how Roman Stoics approached warfare. Marcus Aurelius led armies while writing philosophy about controlling only what you control. He didn't waste energy on weather, enemy decisions, or luck. He poured everything into his response, his discipline, his focus. That multiplied his effectiveness because 100% of his power went into controllable variables. Where's yours going? If this resonates, hit that like button and subscribe. We're excavating the hidden operating systems of human performance that mainstream advice ignores. The nightly review. Alexander practiced it. Successful CEOs practice it. You probably don't. Before sleep, mentally replay your day. What worked? What failed? What pattern emerges? Not guilt calibration. This feedback loop is how strategists learn at 10x speed. They adjust daily, not yearly. While others repeat mistakes for months, they course correct in hours. That compounds into mastery. But here's what really matters: ancient commanders knew the external battlefield reflected internal states. Troop morale determined outcomes as much as tactics. Confidence, clarity, unity of purpose. Without those, no strategy works. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Why commander's intent is still the most powerful tool in any domain. There's a military concept that civilian world barely knows: commander's intent. It's not micromanagement or control. It's brutal clarity about the end state. Ancient generals didn't tell soldiers exactly how to fight. They communicated why they were fighting and what success looked like. Everything else was trust and execution. Clarity amplified by delegation. Do you have that clarity about your objectives? Or are you executing tasks without understanding the strategic purpose? Because without purpose, discipline becomes burden. With purpose, discipline becomes fuel. Commanders understood this viscerally. They spent more time defining mission than giving orders. The mission clarified, everything else became obvious. Prussian strategist Clausewitz observed that friction is the force that makes simple things difficult. In warfare, everything is harder than it appears. The modern equivalent? Every goal encounters unexpected resistance. The question isn't whether chaos will come, it's whether you've built mental operating systems that function inside chaos. That's what ancient generals trained for. Not perfect conditions, worst-case scenarios. Only there's a detail almost nobody catches. Adaptation only works if you have strong foundational principles. Without principles, you don't adapt, you panic. You react. You let circumstances dictate behavior instead of values guiding decisions. Roman generals trained their minds to distinguish controllable from uncontrollable. They didn't fight reality. They worked within it, focusing power where it mattered. That's leverage. Are you fighting variables you can't control? Traffic, other people's behavior, algorithm changes, market conditions. Generals would call that strategic suicide. They'd tell you, release the uncontrollable, dominate the controllable. Your energy, attention, decisions, standards, actions. Pour everything there. That's where power multiplies. Drop this word in the comments. Command. And answer, what's one area where you need to take total control right now? The final lesson from ancient strategists isn't about war. It's about clarity. They won because they saw what others missed. Because they eliminated the irrelevant. Because they acted with intention, not reaction. Because they trained mind like muscle. Because they understood the real battle was always internal. External victory was just the outcome of internal mastery. If you made it here, share this with someone who needs to hear it. We're just beginning to uncover the mental maps that lead to sustainable, authentic achievement.